chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our mayors that are here. And I really quickly want to touch on something because I know that many of you prepared for today's hearing by making sure that you got a little bit of information about immigrants and crime in your cities. Let me ask each of the mayors, just yes or no, have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No,
from the
Congresswoman.
immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on. The Republicans put more effort into producing their little propaganda trailer for this hearing than they have into reforming America's immigration system. And that's why we're here today. In fact, Republicans are beating up on the vast majority of you about what you're doing for your citizens, but the last time I checked, you're actually showing up. You may or may not be aware, but the NRCC just instructed Republicans to stop their town hall meetings because their constituents were showing up and telling them to do your jobs. If I had to sum up some of what you have said thus far today, I would sum it up as you have been trying to tell them as politely as you can to do their jobs. In fact, we know that they have not done their jobs, and so they're trying to force you to do it for them by turning your local law enforcement officers into ICE agents. They have this fake outrage about how immigrants are stealing resources and jobs from Americans when residents of Boston, Chicago, New York City, and Denver are subsidizing public services in their districts and their states because the Republicans refuse to ensure that their constituents earn a livable wage. Look, they don't have a plan to fix immigration in America because they don't want to. Mass deportation isn't a plan. Arresting kids in schools or worshipers in church isn't a plan. But there are important points to discuss as it relates to immigration in America. So, Mr. Beer, in January, you testified before the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Integrity, Security, and Enforcement. During that hearing, we played a little game called Rhetoric or Reality. Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead for round two, why don't we? Rhetoric or reality? Immigrants are a burden to the American taxpayers because they deplete our federal resources.
That would be rhetoric.
Correct. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that immigrants will lower U.S. deficits by a cumulative $1 trillion and increase the U.S. economy's size by nearly $9 trillion over 10 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In 2023, 47 million immigrants paid nearly $652 billion in taxes, $58.1 billion in taxes alone into Texas. Rhetoric or reality? During his first administration, Trump improved enforcement of U.S. immigration laws.
He did not.
In fact, President Trump closed almost all immigration courts for removal proceedings, cut prosecutions for unauthorized entry by 87%, cut ICE removals to the lowest level in the history of the agency, and released 9,000 people with violent crime convictions back into our communities. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So rhetoric or reality? President Trump's immigration policies make American communities safer.
No, they don't make communities safer.
In fact, nearly 100,000 unauthorized immigrants have obtained legal status through their cooperation with law enforcement. And local law enforcement agencies have more than 300,000 pending requests for immigrants seeking legal status based upon their cooperation with law enforcement, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Is that correct?
That's right. Immigrants work with law enforcement to stop and solve crimes.
Thank you. That was one of my rhetoric or reality questions. Sorry. The question was immigrants without legal status can help stop crime. That's correct.
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
All right. And Mr. Beer, isn't it true that Republicans are threatening to illegally strip cities of law enforcement grants intended for local policing and public safety if they don't go along with Trump's immigration agenda?
That's right. They want to redistribute the fiscal burden onto the Democratic cities and away from the Republican ones.
Which brings me to my next point. Mayor Adams, do you believe that President Trump is weaponizing the Department of Justice against local governments like New York City?
As I stated publicly, thank you for the question, Congresswoman. And as I indicated previously, this case is in front of Judge Ho, and I'm going to allow the judicial process to go forward.
Well, let me ask it a different way. There was a quote from Mr. Well, he had to get advice. So can I just get a...
What's that?
He was getting advice. So can I get a little bit of time? I didn't interrupt while he was getting advice.
Time because they were advising it.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is the last one. There was a quote from Mr. Homan, I believe, where he said he will be in your office and up your butt if there was a problem with whatever agreement. We don't know what it was. My question to you, I know you've been asked about it a couple of times today, is was he lying when he said that you made an agreement that would cause him to be up your butt if you failed to uphold your end of it?
And gentlelady's time's expired, but if the mayor wants to answer it, he can.
Congresswoman, I answered that question, and it appears as though we're asking the same questions over and over and over again. My comments are not going to change. No quid pro quo, no agreement. I did nothing wrong.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, mayors, for being here. You all represent cities that should be beacons of opportunities for young professionals, entrepreneurs, and hardworking Americans that want to make it in this world. Not the laughingstocks that they've become in many ways. New York was once hailed as the capital of the world. Boston was admired for its founding role in America. Chicago was the gateway to the West and the icon of the Great Lakes. And Denver was admired for its natural beauty. Now all these cities are seen as a place where illegal immigrants, violent criminals, and gang members thrive, breaking our laws and spreading fear throughout our communities. Let's be clear. Sanctuary policies have not just failed, they've made our cities less safe and less welcoming to those who truly want to contribute to our communities. Here's a perfect example. Laken Riley's murderer was arrested in New York City on charges of detaining a minor. He was released due to New York State's sanctuary status. He was then allowed to go on to Georgia, where he murdered Laken in cold blood. Last night in my district, 400 miles from New York City, 2 members of Trendaragua gang were arrested for an ATM jackpotting scheme that stole more than $100,000. The suspects were also wanted for similar crimes throughout the state of New York, and in your state's Mayor Johnston and Mayor Wu for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, God only knows what else these dangerous gang members are responsible for. Buffalo ICE recently arrested an illegal from Peru who had murdered 23 people and had the victims' faces tattooed on his body. He was allowed to evade law enforcement for a long time due to New York State's green light law that protected him and shielded DMV data from federal law enforcement officials. There is no such thing as a victimless crime. Every crime has a victim, and these victims, they don't have a sanctuary. They have to live with the pain and the trauma of something being taken from them, their safety, their security, their property, and to add insult to injury, the witnesses before us have protected the perpetrators. Mayor Wu, the other day, you stunningly expressed sympathy for the man responsible for the knife attack, not the brave officer who stopped him. Where is the sympathy for the men and women in law enforcement trying to keep us safe?
Congressman,
Where
check your
is this?
facts.
It's my time.
Check your facts. Watch the video.
It's my time.
I did not express sympathy for that
Where is the
individual, but for
sympathy
their
for the
family.
victims?
And any individual
I haven't
whose
asked
life
you a
is
question.
lost is a
It's
tragedy.
appalling to me that we even have to ask for sympathy for victims instead of violent criminals. But here we are. And to all the mayors before us, hindsight being 20/20, is a blessing and a curse. You can't go back in time, but it should give you clarity for the future. Laken's murderer, Jose Ibarra, had demonstrated he was a danger to society. He should have been detained by ICE. I want to ask each of you, yes or no. Do you agree that someone who demonstrates a willingness to harm society should be detained by immigration officials? Mayor Adams. Yes or no?
Within the confines and restrictions of the law, yes, I do.
Okay. Mayor
Someone
John.
that's committed a crime, yes, someone that's committed a crime, yes, should be detained, and we would help them. Every violent criminal should be held accountable, and that's why crime is down in the city of Chicago, because we're doing just that.
Mayor Wu?
If you commit crimes against the people of Boston, you'll be prosecuted.
Another yes or no question. Has anything that's happened in this country in the last 3 years given you reason to consider removing sanctuary city status from your communities? Mayor Adams.
I'm clear that what we do is prevent some of these crimes from taking place.
Mayor Johnston.
We think the system that we have works, and we will keep it.
Violent crime is down in Chicago because of welcoming city ordinance.
Have you considered removing sanctuary city status?
Well, violent crime is down in the city of Chicago under my leadership, and we're going to continue to do what we have to do to ensure that that continues.
Mayor Wu.
We are the safest major city in the country, in
Have-
part because people trust that they can call 911 and help police solve crimes.
Have you considered removing sanctuary city status?
We are going to continue to keep our policies in place that have been working for the people of Boston.
I think you've answered the question. The American people are fed up with the policies that protect criminals, waste taxpayer dollars, and prioritize illegal immigrants over the safety and well-being of hardworking citizens. Your cities, once shining beacons of opportunity, have now become a symbol of failure in leadership. The time for excuses is over, and the American people demand that you take responsibility, abandon these reckless policies, and start putting the safety of your constituents first. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chair, I have a unanimous consent.
Who said that?
From usafacts.org, which states rely the most on federal aid? The number 3 highest proportion of federal funding that a state relies upon is the state of Kentucky, your state, Mr. Chair.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Simon from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Mayors. It's really a pleasure to hear from you today. And Ms. Wu, I was able to meet your sleeping daughter outside, and as a mother myself, I know the care that you are taking not only for your own family, but for our communities. But to all of you, thank you for being here today for so many hours. Just quickly, you know, when I came to Congress, I was under the impression that both members of Congress and folks who are in the federal government take heed to the history of this country. I would love for members of Congress and on this committee to contact the Congressional Research Service and look at the ordinances and the authors who created ordinances of sundown towns. That animus is almost mirrored with the conversations today about our immigrant communities. So when you get in your Uber and when you talk to your nurse and when you go home, I want you to look in the face of the folks that you are disrespecting today. The real crisis is a crisis to me and many who study this issue for a career. It's a broken asylum system. Right now, 3.7 million folks are in this country waiting, and they have waited years, meeting these folks fleeing violence for years, are waiting for an immigration system that works. That is not on the duty of these mayors. It is our job, it's the federal government's job, create an asylum system that honestly purports what we say on the base of the Statue of Liberty, and let's get that work done. Don't blame our mayors who are supporting young people and elders and bringing in federal dollars for health care. I want to yield my time to the gentle lady from New York, Ms. Cortez.
I thank the Congresswoman. I'd like to start with some questions prior to my recognized questions. Mayor Adams, on January 31st of 2025, your attorneys met with federal prosecutors regarding the charges of bribery, campaign finance fraud, and conspiracy against you. Were you aware of this meeting prior to its occurrence?
Congresswoman, as
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. As I stated to your colleagues, and I'm going to continue to state because we're asking the same question over and over again.
This is a new question.
This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to
I
our
understand,
criminal justice
Mayor Adams.
process, I'm going to
Mayor Adams,
defer this
as your
to the
counsel,
court.
I'm sure will inform you. The only permissible way to refuse to answer a question during a congressional proceeding such as this is by pleading the Fifth Amendment. Deference to the judge is not a permissible excuse for not answering questions during a congressional hearing. Is it your intention to plead the Fifth today?
Councilwoman, you said the only way that you can't answer a question is to plead the Fifth. I am answering your question. I'm answering your question directly. that.
You are not, Mayor Adams.
Okay, I believe I am.
I will ask it again. Were you aware of the meeting between your attorneys and federal prosecutors on January 31st? Answering this question is a yes or a no.
And I'm going to answer it again. Out of deference to Judge Holt, with this case
That is not an answer, Mayor Adams.
he is going to deal with the outcome of the case.
Mayor Adams, is it your intention to not comply with these questions?
As I stated, I'm answering your questions, and what you're doing, let's be clear on, you're asking me about communications between my attorney and I. And I don't
Okay,
think
I'll
that
move
is
on to the next
appropriate
question. If
to
it's
be
about- if
asking a
it's-
question
if it's
between
about-
my attorney and I, because we are in a country of law and order.
I understand.
And your
So, Mayor
relationship
Adams,
and
who
communications
is
with
your
your attorney
attorney?
should be respected.
Who is your attorney?
Alex Spiro.
Alex Spiro, thank you. Now, Mayor Adams, have your attorneys ever met with city officials? That is not covered. I'm not asking about your conversations with your attorneys. Have your attorneys met with city officials, New York City officials?
Any communication or activity between my attorney
yes or
and I
no?
is
Have
up to
your-
attorney
have
and
your
I. You can
personal
reach out
attorneys
to,
met with New York City officials?
Alex Spiro, my attorney, to deal with those communications.
Mayor Adams, in this meeting, did anyone representing you, including perhaps Mr. Spiro, agree or allude to any arrangement with the Trump administration that would involve changing city policies in exchange to reconsideration of the charges brought against you?
You say in this meeting? Can you be clear?
In the January
on which-
31st meeting?
Again, there was never any agreement, never any quid pro quo. and
That's
I
not what
did
I'm
nothing
asking.
wrong. Never any agreement, never any quid pro quo.
Was there an
and
allusion
nothing-
to
and
a
nothing
shift
that
in
I've
New York
done
City
wrong.
policy?
Gentlelady's time's expired. And I just want to remind her, Mayor Adams is here voluntarily, and we appreciate that. The topic of the hearing is about our illegal alien problem and the drain on the cities and what the solution is. So Chair now recognizes Mr. McGuire from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important hearing. The American people deserve answers on the disastrous policies of sanctuary cities. As a veteran, as a Navy SEAL, I hope what I'm about to say is common sense. If somebody saved your life on the battlefield, you wouldn't care if they were pink or blue or male or female or Democrat, Republican, or independent. We're all people. This is not a race, religion, or creed thing. This is our American people, we the people, are being robbed, raped, and killed by these criminals that are coming across our border. My first question is just a yes or no. Do you believe that someone who breaks the law is a criminal? Mayor Adams.
Yes, I do.
Next.
If you've broken criminal law,
Just
yes.
simple yes or no.
Did you answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you repeat your question again?
If you commit a crime, are you a criminal? Yes or no?
If you commit a crime, you should be held accountable. Absolutely.
I don't use that label depending on what it is, like a speeding
I
ticket, for
understand.
example.
Next. Well, I got to tell you guys, thank God we have President Trump in the White House. Thank God we have the border czar, Tom Homan. Thank God we have Mike Johnston as a speaker. Thank God we have Leader Thune in the Senate. And thank God we have Hegseth, Rubio, and everyone else. Over the last 4 years, the American people have been robbed, raped, and killed. And the left doesn't talk about that. They want to say that people might be scared in their homes. Well, what about the families whose members have been killed and persecuted? The border has been cleaned up in just a matter of weeks. Border crossings are down 97% in just a matter of weeks. And over the last 4 years, we've been getting lip service like we want to secure the border. 80% of Americans believe we should secure the southern border. We are all elected leaders, and I assume you all sought these positions to help your citizens improve the quality of life in your city. It appears to me that left-wing activists want to create wedges in our society and cause the mayors of our great cities to ignore the oath of office and to support rule of law. Each of you took an oath that included an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, correct?
Yes.
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 Are you aware
Correct.
that Article 6, Section 2 makes laws of the United States supreme, known as the Supremacy Clause? Is everybody aware of this?
Yes.
I'm shocked
Yes.
that you all, as elected leaders, flaunt violating federal laws as if you are running a political campaign. We are a nation of laws. We lose credibility as a nation when we disregard or ignore the law and the people die. As of July 24th, there are more than 660,000 illegal aliens from criminal backgrounds roaming the United States. It is estimated that a total added cost of illegal aliens nationwide is $150 billion per year since the start of 2023. The federal government has spent more than $1.45 billion reimbursing local jurisdictions and non-governmental organizations that provide travel, shelter, and other service to illegal aliens. What about homeless veterans that are living on the street? What about Hurricane Helene victims that are still suffering in North Carolina? What about those folks that are suffering from the forest fires in Los Angeles? Chicago has spent over $639 million. Denver spent over $365 million. Boston is spending potentially, well, about $1 billion annually. And New York City estimates it could potentially spend $12 billion on illegal aliens from 2022 through fiscal year 2025. If you were the president and you found that your cities were spending billions of dollars against the interest of your citizens in violation of the Supremacy Clause, don't you think you would have cause to consider withholding federal funding, yes or no? No answer?
No, because we've not violated any federal law.
Yes, you are making the taxpayers of this nation foot your bill for your potential whims that you don't agree with is wrong, and that is getting people killed. Mayor Wu, in the Boston area alone, Tom Homan said there are at least 9 accused child rapists.
That is
who
inaccurate. That is false.
My time.
That is false.
Local
I'd like
authorities
to see the
refuse
facts
turn
on
over
that.
to
Again,
US
put him under
Immigration
oath and ask the
Customs
questions
Enforcement.
here.
How could you do that to your citizens? It sounds like you care more about your politics than the safety of your citizens. Imagine the parents of those children abused by someone you all released into society.
Congressman, our
It
safety
could have been
statistics
prevented.
are the lowest in the country,
In my
lower than your district.
A little girl was age 14, was raped by an illegal alien. He was released from jail 4 times because it seems, and a lot of you guys on the left, you believe that criminals are good, police are bad, and no one cares about the victims. This horrific crime was avoidable, but it was sanctuary policies like yours that allow the offender to travel to the U.S. and end up in my district. And with that, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Min from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to take a moment just to note that once again this committee is failing to do its job and actually exercise oversight in the way it should. My phones are ringing off the hook with people who are angry as hell about what they see as the rampant corruption of this administration, the illegal activities of Elon Musk and Doge, and the massive cuts to Medicaid that Republicans voted for last week. Literally not one person has called to ask about the immigration enforcement priorities of the cities I represent, let alone Boston or Chicago. This hearing is an attempt to distract from the actual waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse that is happening at unprecedented levels in this country right now. So thank you to the witnesses. I want to start off with a few simple yes-no questions for you all. First, please raise your hand for the mayors if you are aware of any laws or policies that prevent federal authorities from enforcing immigration in your city. Okay, no hands are raised. Please raise your hand if you're aware of any cities or states in America that have laws or policies that prevent federal authorities from enforcing immigration law. Any cities or states. Okay, I just want to know for the record again, there are no hands up. And as your answers make clear, this whole sanctuary city, quote-unquote, debate is a sham. There is no place in America, not one, that actually provides sanctuary from federal law, period. The real issue here is whether state and local governments should spend scarce taxpayer dollars to help the federal government enforce its immigration priorities. Whether local police should spend their time focused on their actual jobs, keeping our streets safe, apprehending violent criminals, solving crimes, or whether they should be deputized to help enforce federal immigration laws. And a lot of cities and states, including my state of California, have made the very reasonable decision to say, hey, we want our teachers, nurses, doctors, cops, firefighters to focus on their actual jobs and not be dragged into this Republican war on immigrants. And let's be clear, the Republican immigration policies being pushed forward right now are counterproductive and will make us far less safe, something several of our mayors pointed out in their testimony. Look, I support a 100% ban on all illegal border crossings, but the reality is we already have over 10 million people here in this country without proper immigration status, many of whom have been here for decades. And if you have ICE agents patrolling our courthouses, police stations, and hospitals, that means that those undocumented immigrants are not going to go anywhere, but they are going to stop reporting crimes or seeking medical care, and this makes us all less safe from the rapists and murderers out there. Now, recently, my Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, a staunch conservative, issued a statement outlining his position on immigration enforcement. And here's what he stated. The Orange County Sheriff's Department does not enforce federal immigration law. It is not part of our primary mission, and we remain focused on violations of state and local laws. The department will provide for your safety and respond to your calls for service regardless of your immigration status. We do not and never will ask the immigration status of victims, witnesses, suspects, or those who call to report crimes. We enforce state and local laws equally without bias and without concern for your citizenship. Now, I actually think this is a pretty good summary of what each of you are describing happens in your cities, a situation where the federal government enforces immigration law while states and local authorities enforce state and local laws, and it makes a lot of sense. I don't know what my colleagues on the other side think, but I don't want my police focused on immigration status and asking people about that. I want them focused on preventing violent crimes. But with that, I want to shift gears to address Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor, as has been well discussed in this committee, you are the first sitting mayor in modern New York City history to be indicted while in office. Last year, of course, you were charged with numerous felony counts for soliciting and accepting bribes for nearly a decade from foreign nationals, businessmen, and others, including illegal campaign contributions and luxury travel. On February 10th of this year, the Trump Justice Department instructed federal prosecutors to drop charges against you. This decision caused 7 federal prosecutors, including a Trump appointee, to resign because they believed this was such an enormous miscarriage of the rule of law in law enforcement. Now, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, this was widely reported as a quid pro quo. I know you've denied that. I know you're probably limited in what you can say. But a lot of people out there, including a lot of people in New York City that I know, believe that these charges were dropped in exchange for a quid pro quo for your agreement to help the Trump administration enforce its immigration policies. So my question for you, Mayor Adams, is actually a very simple one. It's clear that whatever your intentions, whatever actions you take, whether on immigration or anything else, you do not enjoy the trust and confidence of the people of New York City. So my question is, why haven't you not resigned yet, and do you plan to resign today or anytime soon?
I'm really surprised after you laid out your strong belief in the country
It's a
and,
yes/no question.
and what we stand for, that
Why
you are
haven't you
acting
resigned
to
yet,
take away
Mayor
the
Adams?
power
Why have you
of
not
the
resigned
people.
yet?
The
It's
people
not
of
a
the
question that
city
gets to your
elected
lawyers.
me to be
Why
the
have you
mayor,
not resigned yet?
and
Please
you
answer
should
the
not be a
question.
hypocrite and ask the people of the city power to be reserved for them.
Why have you not
I
resigned
was
yet?
elected
And do
by
you
the people of the
intend to
city,
resign anytime
and you
soon,
don't
Mayor?
live in the
Gentleman's
city.
time's expired. Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Jack from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for convening this hearing, and I'd like to begin by offering some thoughts about our colleague from Texas, Congressman Sylvester Turner, who sadly just passed away, as some of you may know. Congressman Turner was a former 2-term mayor of Houston, and as our witnesses can no doubt attest, being the mayor of a big city is not easy. Congressman Turner was a member of our freshman class, and his office is right next to mine in the Longworth House Office Building, and as such, I had an opportunity to walk with him to and from votes, found him to be an incredible gentleman with respect and courtesy. My colleagues across the aisle, particularly the freshmen, knew Congressman Turner better than I, so I certainly yield to them on this topic, but I wanted to at least mention my own thoughts for the record. Now, to the topic of today's hearing, I prepared for today's hearing by chatting with some of the mayors from my district, from those who represent just a few hundred to those who represent a few thousand, and I found a common theme of frustration. They, along with me and many other constituents I proudly represent in Georgia's 3rd Congressional District, want to know why policies are in place that benefit citizens of other countries at the expense of citizens of our own country. So if I could, Mayor Johnston, I'd like to start with you from Denver. I know Chairman Comer, in his opening line of questioning, discussed an ordinance passed by the Denver City Council in 2017, and I recognize you had just left the state Senate by then. But this ordinance prohibits city and county employees from assisting the enforcement of federal laws or inquiring about a person's immigration status. So I just have to ask, do you see a benefit in learning whether or not someone charged with a crime is a citizen of another country?
Thank you, Congressman. I do just want to say Mayor Turner hosted me in Houston when I first became mayor, so that's a powerful statement for me. Thank you for acknowledging it. Thank you, sir. We don't ask someone's status when we first contact them because it's not relevant to whatever charges we may be pursuing. They may list their country of origin on a document that we ask for. It does not indicate their immigration status. They could have legal status but be from another country.
Thank you. Mayor Johnston of Chicago, do you see a benefit in asking someone charged with a crime whether or not they are a citizen of our country?
The benefit of community safety is trust between local residents and law enforcement, and that relationship is critical to driving violence down. Under my leadership, violence has gone down in the city of Chicago.
And Mayor Johnston, if I can ask, have you ever disciplined, fired, or arrested law enforcement officers or correction officers if they notified ICE or other federal immigration officers of an illegal criminal alien in lockup or courts in violation of your sanctuary city policies? Have you ever disciplined, fired, or arrested a law enforcement officer that worked with ICE?
That is not, I don't believe that's under the jurisdiction of the mayor. I don't arrest people or.
Are there issued memos in which you direct Chicago officers from not assisting with enforcement in immigration law or helping ICE identify folks who may not be here illegally?
We do have documentation around making sure that the residents of the city of Chicago know their rights. That's important because it builds trust between law enforcement and community. By having that confidence and trust, people are more likely to come forward to report violent crime regardless of their immigration status.
Well, I have to submit to the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from News Nation Now, January 21st, 2025, in which it says Chicago police reminded they cannot cooperate with deportations. And if I may ask, Mayor, are there any memos? Thank you. Are there any memos that direct Chicago police to not cooperate with President Trump's deportation plans?
Well, so local law enforcement, we're not federal agents. So local law enforcement in the city of Chicago, they do not dub as federal agents.
But that having been said, from your mayoral office, have you ever issued memos to the police department instructing them not to cooperate with President Trump?
We remind people of what the Welcoming City Ordinance entails.
Would you submit to the committee any written documentation to the Chicago Police Department as it relates to this?
For the Welcoming City Ordinance, we're happy to make sure that this body has that ordinance, and that policy has been around for 40 years.
Thank you very much. Mayor Wu, back to my line of questioning with Mayor Johnston and Johnston. Do you believe that if you are asking someone who's been charged with a crime, whether or not they're here in our country legally, is that a proper and beneficial thing to do?
The laws of Massachusetts and the Boston Trust Act help Boston police solve crimes. We do not ask for immigration status because it allows for people to trust that when they call 911, when they have information that might help bring justice to another family, that they feel comfortable sharing that.
Thank you. And Mayor Adams, in closing, obviously you know the police very well. Do you see a benefit in asking folks who've been charged with a crime whether or not they're a legal citizen?
Yes, I do.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Gillen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing everybody seems to agree on here is that our immigration system is broken and desperately needs to be fixed. And I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to work together with us to fix our broken immigration system, to fix our broken asylum system, which isn't fixed by firing the top immigration judges who can actually help us fix this problem. But my focus here today is the effect on my constituents on Long Island. Every day, my constituents are dealing with the effects of the failure to secure our border and the influx of more than 670,000 migrants who have come into the state and New York City, putting a strain on our schools, on public safety and law enforcement, and local governments. Mayor Adams, you said your top priority is to keep New Yorkers safe, but under your watch, the exact opposite has happened. Instead of effectively governing our city, your policies have compounded this crisis. New York has housed migrants in the Roosevelt Hotel for nearly 2 years, not only giving them food and shelter, but also debit cards. In New York, taxpayers have paid about, as you acknowledge, $7 billion to respond to this crisis. That figure is outrageous. And now, instead of stopping the bleeding, you are going back and asking the taxpayers of New York to spend another $1 billion on this crisis. While you focused on your own personal problems, crime has skyrocketed in New York, increasing 20% since you took office in 2021. An AP poll has said that the majority of Americans agree that undocumented people who commit violent crimes should be deported, including 79% of Democrats. But what have you done? I was astounded to hear that ICE was prevented, even if they knew there were gang members in the Roosevelt Hotel, from actually doing anything to get those gang members out of there. Mayor Adams, what have you done, and what is your answer to the taxpayers of New York for the money that has been spent on this crisis?
You raise several things, and there's a level of inaccuracy in some of the stuff you raise. When you look at our crime numbers, I'm not sure where you got those from, but we could give you an accurate account of our crime numbers. Crime has continued to drop since I've been the mayor of the city. We have moved over 20,000 illegal guns off our street. And although we had 230,000 migrants and asylum seekers that came to our door, 189,000 were able to go on to the next step of their journey. We manage a crisis. Congress makes our immigration policies, not mayors. I manage a crisis that was dropped at my door. And I continue to do that every day, and I'm proud of what my team did coming out of COVID and managing this crisis as well. Our city has more private sector jobs in the history of the city. We received our bond rating increase and stabilized. Our city is functioning, and we're going to continue to do the job that I was elected to do.
So spending $8 million is $1 billion is a good job. Mayor Adams, what you said today has given me no confidence in your ability to continue to serve and lead our city.
But you don't live in New York City. You live on Long Island. You don't vote for me.
Mayor, and you should resign. And I said that before you made your deal with Donald Trump.
Thank God you don't live in New York City. You live on Long Island.
But
people
the
of
problems
city,
New York City
people of
affect
city
my
elect
constituents
people
who
of
work
New York
in Long
City
Island, who
elected.
work in Manhattan, whose kids live in Manhattan, who go to the doctor in Manhattan. Everything that happens in Manhattan affects my constituents, Mayor. I yield back.
Would the gentlelady yield to me, please? I thank the gentlelady. My question, Mr. Beer. We've heard a lot about crime. So the overwhelming majority of crime in the United States is committed by undocumented individuals whose immigration status is dubious. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct at all. The overwhelming majority of crime is committed by U.S.-born Americans.
So if I wanted to demonize naturally born Americans, I could cherry pick crime rates from that population and demonize them and dramatize that and use it to smear an entire subgroup in the population. In this case, the majority group. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. You could look at people with driver's licenses and say, man, they're committing a lot of crime. We should stop issuing driver's licenses to people.
I think that's really the sham and the shame of what people are doing in terms of political exploitation of a population this country needs if we're going to grow and protect the social safety net for the future. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming before our committee today. In the past 4 years, our nation has been invaded by millions and millions of people who have crossed our border. There's also millions of what's called known gotaways. These are people that our government has no idea where they came from, who they are, what they're going to do in our country. And many of these known gotaways could be criminals. They could be part of the narco cartels. They could be terrorists. We don't know who they are, and there's millions of them here. This country has also been the victim of fentanyl. This is a dangerous chemical that comes from China, is made into pressed pills in Mexico and Canada, and illegally distributed into our country by the cartels. On average, 200 to 300 Americans die every single day from fentanyl. Not die, they're murdered. They're murdered. Americans have also been victims of all types of illegal alien crimes. One family in particular, Laken Riley's family, I know them personally, and her death was absolutely horrific. Jose Ibarra entered the United States illegally on September 8th, 2022, near El Paso, Texas, with his wife and son. He was detained by the U.S. Border Patrol, but soon released due to overcrowding at detention facilities. After his release, he was transported to New York City, arriving around September 15th, 2022. The following summer, he was arrested by New York Police Department and charged with acting in a manner to injure a child, and a driver's license violation. Before an immigration detainer could be issued, NYPD released Ibarra according to ICE. He later, after this release, moved to Athens, Georgia, where he was cited for a misdemeanor for shoplifting in 2023. This guy got arrested multiple times. He was stopped at the border, but he was continually released. Just a few months later, he brutally murdered Laken Riley. Mayor Adams, do you agree that Laken Riley would still be alive today if New York Police Department hadn't released Jose Ibarra after they arrested him?
Despicable crime. And as a former law enforcement officer, I respond to these crimes as the mayor as well. And I believe people like that should be held accountable. And I've advocated to stop this revolving door criminal justice systems like him to come out and hurt innocent people. I wish we would have had the power to prevent that from happening.
Mayor Adams, will you continue sanctuary city policies in your city?
That policy is by law. I do not make the law. I must operate within the confines of the Constitution and the law.
Mayor Adams, will you advocate to get rid of sanctuary city policies in the city of New York?
I have made it clear on a portion of the sanctuary city policies that I believe we need to alter to prevent crimes like this from taking place.
Federal law under 8 U.S.C. 1324 makes it a crime to knowingly harbor and shield illegal aliens from detection, but your cities refuse to work with ICE detainers to help them find these criminals. I'll go one at a time. Mayor Adams, will you work with ICE in New York City, yes or no?
ICE is part of our criminal justice apparatus, and I will work with my city, state, and federal agencies to keep our cities safe, no matter who they are.
Mayor Johnston, will you work with ICE to protect your city?
We do work with ICE right now, Congresswoman. When they send us information about someone they would like access to, we send them notice when and where we will release them, and they can pick them up. We've done that 1,226 times. We will keep doing it.
Will you end sanctuary city policies?
We think the policies that we have right now allow us to work with ICE and to stop crime, and we'll keep doing that.
Mayor Johnston, will you work with ICE?
Our local law enforcement, Chicago Police Department, we work with federal agents on a variety of issues, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, getting guns off the street, and we will continue to work with federal agents.
Will you stop harboring illegal aliens? Will you end sanctuary city policies?
So the city of Chicago, we do not harbor criminals. We do not harbor undocumented individuals. We comply with all laws.
Mayor Wu, will you work with ICE to protect Americans, legal Americans in your city, and end sanctuary policies?
The Boston Police work with ICE and federal agencies every single day on criminal matters and hold people who are committing crimes accountable.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like to enter for the record, according to the U.S. Constitution, giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States is an act of treason, and those that violate that should be
Without
held
objection, so
accountable.
ordered.
Thank you.
Chair Dale recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, Mayor Adams, are you aware that the former acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon was present at the January 31st meeting between your lawyers and federal prosecutors?
As I stated, and you, Congresswoman, you appear to want to ask the question over and over again, and so I can only
No,
give
these
you
are
the
very
appropriate
different questions,
question over and over again. That this
Okay,
case is
I understand.
front of
Mayor
Judge
Adams, are
Ho,
you not
and
answering
Joe
this
Ho
question because you
will
believe
be
you will
able
incriminate
to respond
yourself?
to the movement
I
of this
understand.
case.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit to the congressional record Danielle Sassoon's resignation letter from the U.S. Attorney.
Without objection to order.
Thank you so much. In her letter, the former acting U.S. attorney, a registered Republican, a former clerk for Antonin Scalia, was appointed by President Trump to serve as acting U.S. attorney, was present at the January 31st meeting between Mayor Adams' attorneys and federal prosecutors. After that meeting with attorneys, the acting U.S. attorney resigned rather than dismiss the charges against Mayor Adams. In her letter, which I have just submitted to the congressional record, Ms. Sassoon stated that during that January 31st meeting, Mayor Adams's attorneys, quote, repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, describing it as a, quote, improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for a dismissal of his case, end quote. The acting U.S. attorney has submitted a former acting U.S. attorney has submitted a letter. And Mayor Adams, do you know how many federal prosecutors total resigned rather than file the motion to drop the charges?
It was reported that 7.
7, correct. Mr. Chair, I would like to submit another letter from Hagan Scotton, his resignation letter.
Without objection to order.
Mr. Scotton was an assistant U.S. attorney who also attended the January 31st meeting between your attorneys and federal prosecutors. He also resigned rather than drop the charges. In his resignation letter, he stated, and I quote, "Our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials." 7 federal prosecutors, the acting U.S. attorney, the assistant U.S. attorney, all gave up their entire careers, Republicans included, then drop these charges because of what they saw transpire in that January 31st meeting. This is important not just for the city of New York, but for the people of the United States of America. Because what is being alleged is genuinely not just about what may or may not have occurred from the mayor's office and with the mayor, but what is happening at the Department of Justice. And that's what I want everyone to understand. These are not Democratic U.S. attorneys. These are Republican U.S. attorneys that have trained under Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices who have stated that there is and suggested as well, that the prosecutorial power at the Department of Justice may be influencing what is occurring. And instead of carrying that out and carrying out the erosion at the Department of Justice, they would have preferred to give up their entire careers. 7 lifelong public servants involved in law enforcement, mind you. And to that, when it comes to the fact that this may or may not have anything to do with this hearing, respectfully, Mr. Chairman, this is about specifically immigration enforcement in terms of that. And this right here is the 4-alarm fire that everyone must be paying attention to. Because if it's not just in the mayor's office of New York City, what other city, what other individual, what other municipality leader can be next? For a party that talks about states' rights and municipal rights, we must defend, yes, the rule of law, including in the Department of Justice. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. LaHood from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to wave on to this important committee hearing today. I want to thank the witnesses. I represent a district right outside of Chicago, the excerpts of Chicago representing Rockford, Bloomington Normal, Peoria. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. It's past time that individuals like the mayors we have before us come before us and explain to the American people why you continue to fail to enforce the laws of our country and allow illegal immigrants to flood into our communities. And it's clear to me that sanctuary city policies have significantly harmed our once great cities, which is very, very unfortunate. During my time as an elected official, I have strongly condemned the policy around sanctuary cities and the impact it's had on the state of Illinois. And I believe every sensible resident in Illinois knows these policies have further harmed the economy in Illinois, increased crime throughout our state, and endangered hardworking, law-abiding Illinois citizens. I want to turn my attention to you, Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago. As I've watched you over the last 2 years that you've been mayor, I've been amazed at how tone deaf you have been and how oblivious you've been to the decline of Chicago. And I say that looking objectively at a number of things. Out of control crime in Chicago, people scared throughout neighborhoods on the west side, south side, north side. Morale has never been lower with law enforcement and CPD. Record number of police officers leaving the force. We have been hemorrhaging people out of the city of Chicago to the suburbs and elsewhere where they feel safe. Record number of businesses fleeing the city of Chicago. You couple that with record deficits, $2 billion deficit, the $2 billion deficit line of credit that you just had to take out this week. But you've spent $300 million of taxpayer money on illegal immigrants. And when I think about all of those things and I look at the strategy you continue to take, I mean, you're putting the interest of illegal immigrants above the interest of taxpayers in Chicago. But you continue to go down this path, and for the life of me, I can't understand it. So, Mayor, tell me why you continue to put the interests of illegal immigrants above taxpayers in Chicago.
Thank you for your representation. Violent crime is down in Chicago.
Well, let me reclaim my time. So I have a statistic here. Last year, Chicago had 573 murders.
Down.
Okay, but I want to compare that to the city of New York that is almost two-thirds the size of Chicago, 337 murders. So you had 573 murders in the city of Chicago, and you're one-third the size.
That's the lowest amount in 5 years under my leadership.
Okay, and you look at the level of violent criminals, sexual offenses, and drug dealers.
All violent crime is down in Chicago. In fact, just this year alone, Congressman, respectfully, there's a 20% decrease in violent crime in the city of Chicago.
I don't agree with your statistics.
Well, it's not a matter of whether or not you agree with it. It's a matter of whether it's a fact.
Let me reclaim my time, because I thought you might do this. And when I hear your answer, no one in this room should be surprised that your approval rating is 6.6%. Now, that's not just me saying this. Newsweek article, the least popular politician in America is Brandon Johnson. So, recent poll, M3 Strategies conducted this February 20th to 21st, showed that Mayor Johnson has a 6.6% approval rating, the worst showing of any political figure in the country's history. So, I know you're talking about crime is down and things are great and, you know, the city's flush with money. None of that is backed up by the people in the city of Chicago. And so I'm wondering why you continue to go down this path of failed policies, destruction to the city of Chicago, people fleeing, law enforcement at an all-time low. And I'm wondering if you have any remorse for that here today and can tell us why you continue to double down on these failed policies.
We've invested $1.25 billion for housing and economic development, particularly for Black Chicago. It's the largest investment in the history of Chicago. 45% increase in youth employment, particularly for Black and brown children. I will not apologize for my investments in the people of Chicago. We have one of the most diverse economies, the top universities. As violence continues to go down and investments continue to go up, that is what's most important. We've opened up 3 mental health clinics, the first mayor since the first Black mayor in the history of Chicago.
I'm going to reclaim my
invest in
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to reclaim my time.
In public health, and I will continue to make those investments.
Your approval rating speaks volumes.
Well, the people approve of my investments, and I will continue to make those investments.
You're going the wrong direction. You need to reverse your policies on sanctuary cities. That's what the election results were last year. Crime and immigration were the #1 issue in the election from Republicans, Democrats,
Chairman, the gentleman's time.
We could use your help to actually help us continue to invest in these programs that continue to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, and I'm willing to work with you, and I'm glad I had a chance to finally meet you for the first time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Davis from Illinois.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank you and Ranking Member Connolly.
If the gentleman could speak into the microphone so we can hear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank you and Ranking Member Connolly for letting me participate in today's hearing. I also want to thank all of the witnesses. I served some time as a city councilman, so I know what it looks like to be mayor and what happens. Thank you for your service. As a proud Chicagoan, I stand in support of our city's locally elected leaders, namely Mayor Brandon Johnston, who could be back home serving the residents of Chicago, but instead is here before us today, preserving and protecting the sovereignty of the city of Chicago as a welcoming and humane city. At a time when immigrants are being blanketly labeled as criminals and targeted haphazardly to fuel the Trump-Musk administration's PR-orientated deportation stunt, I'm proud that since the enactment of the Illinois Trust Act in 2017, the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the city of Chicago have maintained an ongoing commitment to welcoming those in need, including those that have endured persecution abroad and pressed their way across borders, looking and longing for a better life for themselves and their families. I think we all agree that immigration has long played an integral role in the development of American society, culture, and its economy. In recognition of such, the city of Chicago is holding true to its values. As Mayor Johnston has stated on several occasions, that Chicago, and I quote, will remain a welcoming city, end of quotation, despite recent and repeated threats and attempts of coercion from the current administration to do otherwise. Likewise, H.R. 32, the supposed no bailout for sanctuary cities act that undergirds today's hearing, is drafted in the same threatening, intrusive, and non-constructive manner, as the measure unfairly calls for welcoming jurisdictions to be stripped of federal funding that we just heard often goes towards supporting critical public safety initiatives and local programming needs. In fact, I would commend that the bill as drafted infringes on the constitutional balance of power between states and the federal government and will cause more harm than help if enacted. So, Mr. Mayor Johnston of Chicago, the Windy City, the city of the big shoulders, would you share with this committee what principles and concepts guide your thoughts and actions as you go about your task of being mayor for all of these people in Chicago?
Thank you very much, Congressman Davis, for your leadership, and it's good to see my neighbor here today. You know, look, the city of Chicago, we reflect and we represent the best part of America. It's a diverse city, again, a city that was established by a Black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman, a city that has invited immigrants from around the world, a city that was built by the formerly enslaved, my ancestors. And it's a very proud moment to not only represent the city of Chicago, but it is my honor. What we've experienced over the last 20 months since I've been in office, first of all, the city of Chicago is safer. We have violent crime has gone down in the city of Chicago by over 20% just this year alone. We've invested in housing. We've invested in mental health care. We've invested in youth employment. We've invested in our overall community safety. Our community safety plan, 200 more detectives to solve crime. We are headed in the right direction, and I'm grateful for your leadership, and I will look for this body to continue to support these efforts for all of our cities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Evans from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for allowing me to wave on to this committee. And of course, thank you to the witnesses for taking the time to come and have this conversation. So, Denver Mayor Johnston. I'm a Colorado native, grew up in and around the Denver metro area, also Latino, grandson of an immigrant from Mexico, and I also served for 12 years in the U.S. Army, Colorado Army National Guard, and in the Denver metro area for another 10 years as a police officer. And unfortunately, as a Denver metro area police officer, I've seen firsthand how public safety in Colorado and in Denver is plummeting. When I started my law enforcement career, Colorado was ranked 31st in the nation for our crime rate. We were ranked 3rd in the nation last year. Denver, 6 years ago in 2019, they didn't even make the top 50 most dangerous dangerous cities in the country list. This year in 2024-2025, U.S. News and World Report ranks Denver as the 10th most dangerous city in the country. Denver has twice the homicide rate as San Francisco. We've lost more than 7,000 Coloradans to illegal drug overdose deaths since 2020, with a significant percentage of that coming from illegal drugs like fentanyl. And we know from criminal intelligence that in the Denver, Colorado area, almost all of that fentanyl is being trafficked by illegal transnational criminal organizations, the Jalisco cartel and the Sinaloa cartel. We've seen a massive increase. This is just a recent headline. We've seen an increase in TUSI, which is the drug of choice of Tren de Aragua in the Denver metro area. And we've seen headlines that show that overdose deaths in the Denver metro area remain stubbornly flat despite falling in pretty much everywhere around the country. In terms of violent crimes, Denver's had over 6,400 violent crimes, so that's including things like 689 sexual assaults, over 1,200 robberies, over 4,400 aggravated assaults, and again, depending on which database you look at, anywhere from 65 to 71 homicides. Again, double the homicide rate of San Francisco. So the first question to you is, for those homicides, do you know how many of those were committed by people illegally present in the country?
Thank you, Congressman, and happy to answer that because I think you may have some bad facts. I'm happy to clarify them for you. In terms of what's happening in Denver right now, as we know, crime is down in Denver from last year to this year.
Reclaiming my time, Meyer. Do you know?
I do want to answer the question you phrased.
Reclaiming my time. Do you know how many of those 65 to 71 homicides were committed by people illegally present in the country? And I'm happy to show all of the sources for my facts.
We don't ask anyone's status at point of arrest. We do not know someone's status and when they're charged.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad you've brought that up because, as you can see displayed here, we actually have a training bulletin to the Denver Police Department dated January of this year, which pretty much says what you just said, which is that Denver Police Department is prohibited from asking for any information about the national origin, immigration, or citizenship status of any individual, and that's a problem because of the second item that we're going to display here, which is the standard FBI fingerprint card, something that I filled out for over a decade when I was a police officer, which has those items as mandatory fields, location of birth and then the citizenship. And so I've heard, being a cop in the Denver metro area, that police officers in Denver are being told not to fill out those mandatory fields in the FBI fingerprint card, which could potentially indicate why you're unsure of how many of these crimes are being committed by illegal immigrants in your city. So the second question is, will you allow Denver police officers to fill out all of the information on an FBI fingerprint card, to including asking for and recording the citizenship status?
Thank you, Congressman. Right now, under city ordinance, we do not ask someone's status at point of contact, and that does not prejudice in any way our prosecution. We believe it doesn't matter where someone's from,
thank you, Mr.
what crime
Mayor.
they've committed.
So you're not
so
you're not filling out the FBI fingerprint card as required?
Right now, we are filling out information when folks arrive, and none of that information prevents us from prosecuting them to the full extent of the law, which is what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So not filling out the FBI fingerprint card, which would directly contradict your statement that you want people who are illegally present in the country and committing crimes to be held to account for those crimes. And I think that the statistics that we've gone through in the space of crime show why Denver is specifically cratering in their public safety statistics as compared to major cities around the country.
That's actually false.
I can show you my statistics. And as a police officer, I am here to make sure that we are uplifting the voices of the victims of these crimes who are being taken advantage of in communities that provide sanctuary to dangerous illegal criminal gangs like Tren de Aragua, which your jail released just last week. We talked about somebody back into the community. We must take care of our victims. I've brought legislation, the Uplift Act, to focus on this. We're here to protect the victims. And Mayor, I would ask you to join me in that.
We've already done that.
Yield
and
back.
We'll keep doing that. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Crank from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, wait, one moment.
Just quick UC. I would ask unanimous consent to enter the record an NPR article entitled Criminal Records of January 6 Rioters Pardoned by Trump Include Rape, Domestic Violence. And I would also ask the correspondence between a number of us and the new Attorney General, Pamela Bondi, be entered into the record at this point.
Without objection, so ordered.
The Chair.
Now, Chair recognizes Mr. Crank from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to wave on. This is a very important issue to the state of Colorado. And Mayor Johnston, thanks for being here. I know for all of you it's been a long day. Appreciate you being here. Mayor Mike Johnston, Denver has an ordinance that prohibits city and county employees from assisting in the enforcement of federal immigration laws or inquiring about a person's immigration status. We've just talked about that. The city of Denver also has a legal defense fund to support individuals facing deportation. Denver's received more than 41,000 illegal aliens over the past 2 years, and due to its sanctuary status, has become a popular destination for illegal aliens. It's estimated that Denver spends more than $180 million a year supporting illegal immigrants. And in rare cases where ICE is able to apprehend an illegal immigrant in Denver jails, Denver forbids that transfer from taking place in the jail. Now, I just did a ride-along with El Paso County Sheriffs. That's my home county, Colorado Springs, just an hour away. I just did a ride-along with them for the safety of their officers, and the ICE officials. The community and the detainee do transfers in the jail with El Paso County officers present and with the handcuffs on. Now, that El Paso County method has never, ever resulted in the injury of an officer during the transfer. However, in Denver, you require that Denver Police Department release Tren de Aragua gang members to the quote-unquote streets, uncuffed, and hope that ICE agents aren't able to apprehend them on their own. That's the hope. Let's just be honest. With no Denver Police Department officer there to assist if the situation turns violent, that's irresponsible. And to be clear, there's no federal law that forces you to do it this way, Mr. Mayor. This policy and the danger that it creates is wholly a result of your policy as the city and county of Denver. Just last week, it resulted in an illegal Tren de Aragua member assaulting and biting an ICE agent because he was uncuffed and he was released by Denver to a parking lot. Now, you're putting police officers who you're sworn to help protect as their mayor at risk to score political points. And I think it's outrageous. It's unbecoming to your office, and it's a danger to the people of Colorado and the citizens of Denver. Now, we have this case, and I know you've talked about it today. Abraham Gonzalez, suspected TDA gang member, released from Denver County Jail, as I mentioned, due to Colorado's sanctuary policies. This is a post by ICE. Was forced to arrest him in public. ICE was forced to arrest him in public where he assaulted officers, sanctuary policies, endanger communities, and law enforcement. That's their post. I'd ask that this be entered into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Objection, so ordered.
Mr. Mayor, yes or no? Would you feel safe if you were alone in a parking lot with a Tren de Aragua gang member?
We did not put a situation where someone
Just yes or no. Would you feel safe if you were in a parking lot alone with the Tren de Aragua member like you make your police officers do, or like you make an ICE agent do? Yes or no?
There were 6 ICE agents on the scene.
Could you answer
when
my
he was
question?
released
Would you feel safe
without
in
any weapons?
Would you
in
feel
a
safe?
secure location
Reclaiming my time. Thank you.
with
Would
a fence around
Coloradans, reclaiming my time, Mr. Mayor, you're not going to answer the question. Would Coloradans be safer if ICE had full cooperation from Denver to remove Tren de Aragua gang members? Yes or no?
We currently honor those notification requests. We've done it 1,226 times. This is the first time I've ever been aware of there being an incident, which is why I reached out to ICE
Full
yesterday.
cooperation would be allowing them to come into the jail and doing it in the jail, not in the parking lot. Will you change that? For the safety of your officers and those ICE agents, would you change that?
I reached out to the ICE officers as soon as I heard about this. I have a meeting with them in the coming weeks to talk about the procedure. We have 2 jails. 90% of the pickups are from the other jail where we've never had an occurrence
Would you
like this.
change it?
And so I'm going to sit down with the ICE officers and see if they're
It's just common sense. You don't do a transfer in the middle of a parking lot when you can do it in a jail. It's common sense. It's common sense.
It's been common sense 1,226 times it's worked, and so we're going to figure out what happens.
Mr. Mayor, is your highest
Figure out how to-
priority as mayor the citizens, the safety of the citizens of Denver?
My priority as mayor is to protect public safety for all of our
Okay,
residents.
last question. Have you apologized to the federal law enforcement agent who was assaulted by a Tren de Aragua gang member because of your failed leadership? Yes or no?
I reached out to the ICE officers yesterday, and I've asked to sit down with them to talk about this procedure and how we can align systems to make sure no other officers get injured.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I gathered from this hearing, the term sanctuary cities seems to mean a sanctuary only for criminals. Throughout this hearing, we have heard countless examples of illegal immigrants with criminal histories being allowed to roam free in these cities and continue to commit crimes and violence against American citizens that should never have happened. The bottom line is that sanctuary policies are a violation of federal immigration laws. The states, when they enacted the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, made it very clear that it's in the purview of the federal government, not the states, to determine these policies. States shouldn't be flaunting our laws that they gave us the sole responsibility to implement. And yet Chicago, Denver, New York City, and Boston are aiding and abetting in the furtherance of laws and policies that are in direct defiance of the immigration laws that are passed by Congress. This hearing is important for us as Congress to determine ways in which we can use our constitutional powers, such as the power of the purse, to force these and other sanctuary cities into compliance. My first question, I want to ask Mr. Byer. You haven't had a lot of questions today, right?
Not enough.
I want to ask, okay, so are you aware of how much it costs the American taxpayer per illegal immigrant in the United States, roughly?
Not on a per capita basis, no.
Okay. The Budget Committee has determined it's almost about $9,000 in net loss per per illegal immigrant.
That's definitely not correct.
Okay, you can question, but that's the group that did the research. So let me ask you this: does Cato support subsidizing creating taxpayer programs to subsidize other people's health care benefits?
No, we don't.
Okay. Does Cato support using taxpayer dollars to support people staying in hotels?
Definitely not.
Okay, just wanted to get that cleared up because I was worried where Cato stood. Mr. Adams, you stated that the migrant crisis. Wait, first, I want to ask this question from everybody on the panel. Is there a difference between, if there's a difference between the ICE detainer and a criminal warrant, which one would you honor?
I'm sure I understand the question. You said there's a difference between an ICE detainer and a criminal warrant?
Yes.
We would always honor an ICE detainer that comes with a judicial warrant. That is what the law calls for in the city.
Okay, and do you concur? Is that what you would do?
We always support our criminal warrants with ICE requests, yes.
Okay. Mr. Johnston?
With a criminal warrant, our local police department, with a criminal warrant, will collaborate and cooperate with federal agents.
And Mrs. Wu?
Whenever there's a criminal warrant from any agency, Boston Police enforce it.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, I'm concerned about what's happening, obviously, my neighboring state of Illinois. But you said that you're prepared, let's see, you said that you oppose proposals to eliminate sanctuary protections for illegal immigrants that are convicted of serious crimes. Why do you think it's important to protect even violent criminals?
We do not protect violent criminals. In fact, my top priority is to make sure that the people of Chicago are safe. Our local law enforcement work hard every single day to ensure that. That's why I invested in more detectives so that we can actually solve crime. And as a result of the work that I've done under my leadership, crime has gone down since I've been mayor.
Mrs. Wu, you've said multiple times, you made it very clear that you're a welcoming city, knowing that there is a cost to the taxpayer. What's the acceptable number? Is there any acceptable or reasonable limit that you would consider before your city is overrun?
We are a city that is the safest in the country because everyone feels connected to city services. Everyone can
So
call
there's
911.
you have no answer. There's no capacity. That's too
Congressman, respectfully, I'm the mayor of Boston. I don't get to decide who comes into our country and where they go after that. Our job is to keep people fed and healthy and safe when they arrive in our city. And we do that in order to make sure that everyone across our community is safe. Resources are strained, but I would ask you to please do your job and be part of passing bipartisan legislation that would allow us to do what
we passed H.R. 2, but what's been made very clear is that we don't need to pass laws. All we need is a new president. My time has expired.
Gentleman's time's expired. They've called for votes, but we have one last question. Mr. Hurd from Colorado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Mayor Johnston, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I have a question about Denver's policies that I fear have made it a magnet for migrants and have drawn tens of thousands to Denver in a short amount of time. Given the strain that's being placed on city resources, is there a limit, and this might be similar to a question that was just asked before, if another wave of arrivals begins, does Denver have a contingency plan, or is the commitment to being a sanctuary city truly open-ended no matter how many come?
Thank you, Congressman. And we have adjusted our policies when we were facing some of the fiscal crisis around this. We were hoping for the Senate bipartisan immigration bill to pass, which would have provided some resources to interior cities. When that didn't, we had to make adjustments. And so what we've done now is we've really focused on connecting people to work. So those folks that arrive, we think the most important thing is for them to be able to work and support themselves, pay their own taxes, pay their own rent. And so we've run work authorization clinics to help people get legal work authorization. If this body could help us accelerate the rate of work authorization, we would not need to spend any public resources at all because folks want jobs they could support themselves. So that's been our real focus. The more folks we work authorized, we've been able to then need to provide fewer resources around housing, shelter, food, et cetera.
Are you concerned that Denver could be reaching a breaking point soon?
Thank you, Congressman. We actually are seeing dramatic drops in arrivals since June of 2024. So we are not in a moment of crisis right now. We don't have migrant encampments. We've closed all of our shelters. We've actually dropped our spending on migrant supports by 90% from 2024 to 2025. So our expenditures are down dramatically, and we'd love to see it stay that way.
How about my concern about incentivizing certain actions? Do you have any concrete evidence that sanctuary policies have not made Denver more vulnerable to crime?
Thank you, Congressman. We do have concrete evidence that even as 42,000 newcomers have arrived in the city over the last 18 months, crime has gone down in Denver. And so shootings are down 24%, homicide is down 17%, auto theft is down almost 30%. So we've seen all those major drivers go down. At the same time, we've had new folks arrive.
And that's because of the sanctuary policies or in spite of them, or what would those numbers be absent the policies in Denver that incentivize these behaviors?
Thank you, Congressman. We see them as unrelated. We are continuing to make a strong stand on public safety. We're continuing to find ways to integrate folks who have arrived on our city in the middle of the winter with no clothes or support, and we've been able to do both. We've also made historic reductions in homelessness at the same time that we were facing this. I declared an emergency on homelessness because that was our top priority, and we've become the largest big city in America to end the cycle of street homelessness for veterans. So that's been equal part of our focus at the same time.
So just so I'm clear on your testimony, you don't believe that there's any evidence that the city of Denver's policies have made Denver more vulnerable to crime?
No, sir, I do not see any evidence that it has.
Okay. If violent criminals are exploiting these protections, are you willing to reconsider aspects of the city's policies to prioritize public safety?
Thank you, sir. We are very aggressively pursuing violent criminals right now. In fact, we're doing it in collaboration with many federal agencies. We have a Raven task force we launched, which has been focused on disrupting gang activity. That's why we've been so successful in managing and reducing the presence of TDA in the city. It's how we helped reduce the presence of MS-13. So we have aggressive actions going here and partner with federal agents, and that's working.
One of the concerns that I've heard, Mayor Johnston, in Western Colorado and Colorado's 3rd Congressional District and also in Southern Colorado is that there are illegal immigrants here that are coming to, or that are in Denver that are then relocating to Western and Southern Colorado. Are you aware, or can you confirm that the illegal migrants that are in Denver, that were in Denver, have stayed in your city and have not traveled to other parts of the state?
Thank you, sir. Obviously, as you know, when folks arrive to Denver, whether they come from Carbondale or Grand Junction or Chicago, we don't track where they go. It's a free country. If they choose to move to Lakewood or to move to Pueblo, we wouldn't know. We just provide the emergency services to make sure they're not freezing on the streets. And so that's our focus, but we don't track anyone's long-term trajectory, whether they're a native-born or an immigrant.
Would it surprise you if there were individuals that were leaving Denver that were relocating to other parts of Colorado?
It wouldn't surprise me that folks were moving in the same way it doesn't surprise us that folks are constantly relocating to Denver from other parts of the country as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor Johnston. Mr. Chairman, I see my time has almost expired, and I yield the remainder back.
Well, thank you very much, and that's it. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and believe it or not, this is the best behaved this committee's been all Congress. So I want to compliment my ranking member, Mr. Conley, and again, thank you for your testimony today. I look forward to further discussion. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.